Hi, everybody. It is June 1st, 2020, the Monday after a difficult weekend in the United States, which saw nationwide protests against the brutal murder of George Floyd. Um, and I wanted to do a reading in honor of this event. And Mark Twain came to mind, and I asked myself, let's see if we can find a good quote from Mr. Clemens. And then remembered that he wrote probably the most powerful work on the topic of racism in the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. And so I browsed through that and found what is probably the most important passage in the story. And at this moment, Huck, who was brought up in a culture in which slavery was not only normal, it was justified by a really horrific interpretation of Christianity. And in this moment in the story, Huck is conflicted. He's feeling very guilty. He's worried about his immortal soul for protecting a runaway slave, his friend Jim. And so he decides that it is the right and Christian thing to do for him to give Jim up, and writes a letter telling the authorities where he is. But then he stops to think about it. I felt good and all washed clean of sin for the first time I had ever felt so in my life, and I knowed I could pray now. But I didn't do it straight off, but laid the paper down and sat there thinking how good it was all this happened so, and how near I come to being lost and going to hell. And went on thinking. And got to thinking over our trip down the river, and I see Jim before me all the time, in the day and in the nighttime, sometimes moonlight, sometimes storms, and we are floating along, talking and singing and laughing. Somehow I couldn't seem to strike no places to harden me against him, only the other kind. I'd see him standing my watch on top of his instead of calling me so I could go on sleeping. And see him how glad he was when I come back out of the fog, and when I come to see him again in the swamp up there where the feud was, and such like times. And would always call me honey and pet me and do everything he could think of for me, and how good he always was. And at last I struck the time I saved him by telling the men we had small-pox aboard, and he was so grateful, and said I was the best friend old Jim ever had in the world, and the only one he's got now. And then I happened to look around and see that paper. It was a close place. I took it up and held it in my hand. I was a-trembling because I'd got to decide forever betwixt two things, and I knowed it. I studied a minute, sort of holding my breath, then says to myself, all right then, I'll go to hell. And tore it up. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, everybody, and I'll see you next time. Bye.